Hey everyone, I made a video and a blog post not too long ago about setting up MySQL replication for 8.0 on Ubuntu, and I recently had a comment on my YouTube channel for setting this up with MySQL 8.4. Some things have changed, mainly the commands and the syntax that you need to use. It was quite frustrating having to go through the documentation and learning the commands again just to do basically the same thing over. So what I've done is I've also written a blog post about this on my website, and as customary I've started making YouTube videos documenting it as well, just in case it's easier for people to follow along in this video format. So what I've got is I have two Linux systems. I've got MySQL 1 and I've got MySQL 2. And what we're going to be doing is setting up MySQL replication using an SSL certificate generated on MySQL 1 so that the replication is encrypted. And in this setup, obviously MySQL 1 will be operating as the master, MySQL 2 will be the replication slave. Awesome. I've just finished my coffee in my Roy Orbison mug, so let's get started. So there are some things that we need to do on both systems before we then drill down into each. The first thing we need to do is we need to download the relevant MySQL installer. What we'll be doing is we will use wget for this, and we'll run this on both systems. And by the way, I will link to the full blog post in the description below, so you don't need to manually type these out by watching the video. That would be very painful. Awesome, so now that we've downloaded that tar file, what we need to do is unpack it, and we'll do that on both systems. And next we'll be installing a couple of libraries that make installing those packages easier. So we'll say yes to the installers. Awesome. And now what we can do now is we can install each of those packages and the dependencies using dpkg. We'll do this on both systems. Now during this process, it should ask us to set a root password for MySQL as well. Perfect, and here we are, it's asking for a root password. I'm just going to set this as root because I'm just doing a test. If this is your production environment, I would recommend setting a more secure password. And I'm also going to set that on both systems. You might see you get a couple of errors, they're usually safe to ignore. Perfect, and now that MySQL is installed, what we can do is test we actually have 8.4 installed using MySQL -- version, and that will confirm on both systems that we are using MySQL 8.4.4. What you could also do is get logged into MySQL, so sudo mysql-u root-p, enter the root password that we just set up, and then once you're in here, what you can do is select version, open and close brackets, semicolon, and it will also tell you the version here. I won't do that on the other system because it's exact same. Awesome, and now that we've done that, we might as well clean up those packages. So if we do an ls, you'll see that we have, where is it in this list? I'm looking for the tar file. Okay, yeah, so we got the tar file, and then when we unpack this tar file, it gave us a whole bunch of .deb files. So we might as well clean this up. What we can do is run sudo rm star.deb. That will get rid of all the deb files. And then what we can do just to get rid of the tar file is sudo rm mysql shift to autocomplete and then enter. Awesome, and I've just done that on the replication system as well. What you could do at this stage is go through the MySQL secure installation script. So sudo mysql _secure installation. But I won't be doing that because this is just a tutorial. Awesome, so what we can do now is focus purely on MySQL 1. The first thing we need to do is allow the firewall to allow access on 3306. This is a port typically used for MySQL access. What we need to do now is update the MySQL configuration, so we'll do this using the nano text editor, and this is the path to the MySQL configuration file that we'll need to edit. So if we come into here and then scroll right down to the bottom, you see there's already some items under MySQL-D, and what we're doing is we're adding these values. So these are pretty much exactly the same as my previous tutorial. So we're setting a server ID which needs to be unique for each MySQL server that you're setting up in the same environment. Because this is the master and the first system in this setup, I'll be setting the ID to 1, the log bin to MySQL-bin, bin log format to mixed, and the sync bin log to 1. Now under here, what we're doing is we're setting some SSL certificate and key paths. These will be created soon, so just don't worry about these unless you want to update these paths and create them somewhere else. Now that we've done that, we can actually start creating those SSL certificates. So what we'll do first is we will create a new directory for those certs. What I normally do is I set full permissions, simply because the open SSL commands that we're going to use sometimes stumble if they don't have full permission, and then we'll cd into that location. What we need to do first is create the ca-key.pem file. And again, you can just copy and paste these from my actual blog tutorial. Once that's created, we need to create the ca-cert.pem. Now in here, it will ask for a common name. So there's 3 certificate and key pairs that we'll be creating. One's for the CA, one's for the server, and one's for the client. So for this one, if we press next, 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 when we get to the common name, I'm going to call this MySQL-CA. And all the other values will be blank. Now that the CA is created, what we'll do is we will create the server-rec.pem file. And again, with this one, we will have to enter a unique common name. So what I'll set for this one is just MySQL-server. And all the other entries I will leave blank. And then the last one for the server group is the server-cert.pem. Awesome. And finally, what we will create is the client-rec.pem. This is the last pair, and the common name for this, you might have guessed, I'm going to set it to MySQL-client. All the other entries will be blank. And finally, we will create the client-cert.pem file. So now that we've created those certificates, what we're going to do is we're going to give the MySQL user and MySQL group ownership of those certificates and that directory. And then we're going to fix the permissions to 555 instead of 777. And then what we're going to do is actually restart MySQL and make sure that it comes back online. And just to confirm, what you can do is sudo ctl status MySQL. And we can see it's running, so that's perfect. So what we need to do next is create an actual user that we will use to authenticate to the master from any replication slave servers that we set up. So we need to sudo mysql-u root-p, and we'll enter the root password that we created earlier. And then what we can do is enter this command. So we're creating a new user called replication, authenticated against any host, and then identified by this password here. And I'm going to leave this literally just password here. And then we're telling it to require SSL. Once we've done that, we can grant replication permissions to that user. And then what we can do is actually update the privileges with flush privileges. Perfect. And because we're already in the MySQL command line, what we can do is lock the tables, because we're going to get ready to actually dump the MySQL database so that we can import it onto the replication server. What I always like to do is once I've flushed the tables, I like to show the actual log status. So this will show me the log file and the position as well. We'll get this from the export file that we create, sorry, the dump file that we create soon. But I always like to do this here and make a note of it just to see if they actually do line up. It's not the end of the world if they don't, it's just more a peace of mind thing that I do. What we can do now is exit that, and now we're back into our Linux terminal, and we'll run the MySQL dump. So I'm adding some variables here that I typically use. What I would recommend is actually searching the documentation and seeing if you need these for a start, and checking if you need any others. And then we're just outputting that to the temp directory into a file called snapshot.sql. The password it asks for here is the root password for MySQL, and for me that is literally just root. And then what we'll do is we can press the up arrow a couple of times, and we'll get logged back into MySQL. and then we can unlock the tables again and then exit. Okay, so what we need to do now is move the MySQL dump file that we just created along with the 3 certificates that we need. And the 3 certificates we'll be moving is the CA cert, the client cert, and the client key. So what I'll do is I will copy the base commands that I have, and what you'll need to do is update them just like I am now. So first one is sudo scp, and we're moving the temporary snapshot that we've just made. I'm going to need to update the user, so mine is just root admin, and then the IP address I've got at the top, so this is 172.31.167.65. And then I can click yes, because I'm connecting to the MySQL 2 server for the first time, and then enter the root admin user password that I specified here. What I'll do is I will go through for the 3 certificates as well, so exactly the same. This one will be updated to root admin with the IP address being updated to 172.31.167.65. And then what I'll do is I'll just reuse this command. So I will, oh sorry, it's still wanting, so this is the root admin password. I think I might have entered something else there. Root admin. Okay, perfect. So what we can do now is to move the other 2, rather than pasting the command in and then updating it, we can just press the up arrow to bring it back, come back to this part, and the next one we want to move is called client-cert, and we can do a tab there just to autocomplete, and press enter, and then the last one we can just get to there and press K and then shift to autocomplete. Awesome, so that's all the files that we need moved onto MySQL 2. So what we'll do is we will head onto MySQL 2 now. The first thing we need to do here, just like MySQL 1, is edit the MySQL config. So we'll come down to the bottom of this file and we will add the following parameters. We can get rid of that line because that's already added for us. Sorry, I'm all over the place here. So the server ID I'm incrementing to 2. So very simple. My MySQL 1, the master, is 1. This one is 2. If you had more replication servers, it would be 3, 4, 5, so on. You get it. And then I'm just setting the following parameters down there. So Control O to save that and exit. What we'll do next is we will create the directory to hold the certificates. And for right now, what we will do is set full permissions on this location just while we move them. And so because we've already used SCP to move the files to this server, what we can do is just move them again from that temp location to the certs location. And we will do this for all 3. So that's the CA cert, this is the client cert, and then finally this is the client key. What we'll do next is exactly the same as MySQL 1. We will update the ownership so that the MySQL user and the MySQL group own this cert directory. And then we will update the permissions to something a bit more sensible. What we can do now is restart MySQL on MySQL 2 and check the status to make sure it's actually running. And finally, what we can do now is import the MySQL dump that we transferred. So this is sudo mysql-u root-p-f, and then this little symbol here means that we're pushing the snapshot into it. And then we need to enter the root password for MySQL. So this is super fast on my machine because it's basically an empty database. On yours, it will be depending on how big the actual snapshot and database import file is. So I showed this on the master, but what we can also do is get the source log position from the actual snapshot file, and I think that's about the values that we had on the other system. Again, if it doesn't match exactly, it's not the end of the world. One thing to note is from the previous tutorial where I did MySQL 8.0, this has changed to source log position, whereas before it was master log position, and that's the same for all of the commands that we're going to run shortly as well. So now that we've imported the backup dump and we know the log position, what I'm going to do is just get that into another notepad, So we've got that there. And what we can do now is we can actually start to build the command that we need to run in MySQL to actually start the replication. So the important parts, the host, this needs to point to the master. So I'm going to grab this IP address here and enter it. Replication user is the same for me. The password is the same for me because I just left it as this for the demo. So this needs to be updated to this value, and then the log position here, that's already the same. For some reason it seems to stick to certain numbers, so for me it's fairly common to get 158, and we're going to tell it to use SSL, and then we're setting the SSL certificate locations here. So this is where I mentioned earlier, if MySQL doesn't start, check these paths and make sure you've actually put the certificates in the right position. So what we'll do is we'll copy that command and we'll get logged into MySQL using sudo mysql-u root-p. Once we're logged into the MySQL CLI, we will paste that command that we've just generated and press enter. What we'll do now is enter stop replica. This will just stop any replica that you might have on an existing server. This is a completely fresh system, so I've got nothing on here. And we can start the replica next. If I can type start replica, and then we will show replica status /g, and make sure this G is uppercase. And if everything went well, the replica IO state will be waiting for source to send event. And that's how you know that you are connected to the MySQL master using SSL and everything's fine. If you get anything other than this state, again, check the SSL certificates, make sure they're in the right location. Let's test the connection. So on MySQL 2, what we'll do is we will show databases, and you can see we've only got the basic built-in 4 databases. If we come across to MySQL 1, and I'll just split these in the center of the screen like I had in the beginning. So on MySQL 1, let's also get logged into MySQL. There we go. Show databases. Okay, so they're currently the exact same. So what we can do to test the connection is create a database on MySQL 1, and we should see it automatically created on MySQL 2. Let's do that now. Create database replica test. And we can now see this new database. What we can do on MySQL 2 is just show databases again, and we can see replica test is now showing. And if we drop that database replica test, it's gone from the master and it's now gone from the slave again. So just in conclusion, setting up SSL replication on MySQL 8.4 is basically the exact same as MySQL 8.0. The only difference is some of the commands have changed. They seem to have removed the word slave and instead put replica. I'm not too sure why they've done this. I think it's just wording. To be honest, it's just a case of updating the config and the commands that you use, and you're off to the races. And as I've mentioned a couple of times already, I will leave a link to this blog post in the description, and you can follow along with that, copy and paste commands just like I've done now. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like if you actually found this helpful, and comment if you want extra help or a specific guide on anything else. Oh, and make sure to subscribe.